August 15, 1940, above the English Channel, 20,000 feet. Hauptmann Klaus Steinbrenner, 28 years old, gripped the controls of his Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighter, his knuckles white against the leather gloves. What he witnessed in the skies over Dover defied everything the Luftwaffe intelligence had promised him. Instead of catching the Royal Air Force fighters by surprise as planned, British Spitfires were already climbing to intercept his formation, perfectly positioned as if they had been waiting for hours. The metallic tang of fear filled his mouth as he watched enemy aircraft emerge from cloud cover at precisely the right altitude, the right heading, the right moment. Steinbrenner understood with growing dread that somehow, impossibly, the British had known they were coming long before his engines had even warmed up on the French airfield. This moment would shatter his faith in German technological superiority and reveal a secret weapon that would change the course of the war. Before we explore how this revelation changed everything for these skilled aviators, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. We love hearing from viewers around the world who are fascinated by these untold stories of human discovery during World War II. The story begins 3 months earlier, when Steinbrenner had been among Germany's most confident fighter pilots. Born in a small Bavarian village near Munich, he had joined the Luftwaffe in 1936, drawn by promises of advanced aircraft and revolutionary tactics that would guarantee German air superiority. His father, a veteran of the Great War, had warned him about British resilience, but Klaus dismissed such concerns as outdated thinking. The new Germany possessed the world's most advanced military technology, or so every briefing insisted. During training at Schleißheim, instructors had emphasized the element of surprise as their primary advantage. German intelligence reported that British radar installations were primitive, unreliable, and easily overwhelmed by large formations. The chain-home system, they were told, could barely detect aircraft approaching at low altitude and was completely blind to formations flying above 15,000 feet. These massive steel towers scattered along the English coast were described as clumsy experiments, no match for Luftwaffe precision and speed. Steinbrenner had absorbed these lessons completely. His squadron had practiced dawn raids, believing they could approach British airfields undetected and destroy RAF fighters on the ground before pilots could scramble. The mathematics seemed simple. German pilots flew superior aircraft, possessed better training, and enjoyed the advantage of choosing when and where to attack. British pilots, according to intelligence reports, spent most of their time sitting in dispersed shelters waiting for visual confirmation of incoming raids that would arrive too late to matter. The Luftwaffe's confidence stemmed from their experiences during the Spanish Civil War and the lightning campaigns in Poland and France. German aircraft had achieved air superiority within days, sometimes hours, by exploiting the enemy's inability to coordinate defensive responses. Radio communications were slow, visual spotting unreliable, and command structures rigid. Modern warfare rewarded speed, surprise, and technological advantage, all areas where Germany excelled, according to every briefing Steinbrenner had attended. Statistical reports supported this confidence with impressive numbers. German aircraft production had increased by 400% since 1936, reaching over 1,000 aircraft per month by early 1940. The Luftwaffe possessed approximately 2,600 operational aircraft, including 1,000 bombers and 800 fighters, compared to Britain's estimated 700 operational fighters. German pilots averaged 240 flight hours before entering combat, significantly more than their Allied counterparts who often flew with less than 100 hours of experience. But something began to change during Steinbrenner's first missions over Britain in July 1940. Instead of the confused, scattered response they expected, RAF fighters appeared with disturbing regularity at precisely the right locations. British pilots seemed to know not only when German formations approached, but also their altitude, heading, and approximate strength. What had been promised as easy victories became increasingly costly engagements. The journey to this shocking realization began with small, troubling details that Steinbrenner initially dismissed. During a July 20th raid on a coastal convoy, his formation of 12 Bf-109s encountered 16 Spitfires already climbing to intercept them 30 miles from the English coast. The British fighters had gained optimal altitude and positioning, suggesting they had been airborne for at least 20 minutes before the German formation crossed the channel. Steinbrenner's wingman, Lieutenant Friedrich Waldmann, mentioned seeing British aircraft climbing inland while German formations were still assembling over Calais. What happened next surprised everyone involved. Instead of the predicted air superiority, German formations found themselves consistently outnumbered by British fighters that appeared to materialize from nowhere. RAF pilots demonstrated uncanny ability to position themselves advantageously before engagements began, climbing to optimal altitudes while German formations were still approaching at lower levels. British squadron leaders seemed to possess detailed information about German strength, routes, and timing that should have been impossible to obtain. Steinbrenner began keeping detailed notes in his personal diary, documenting patterns that troubled him increasingly. July 28th. British fighters waiting at 25,000 feet as we crossed Dover. How did they achieve such altitude so quickly? August 3rd. Spitfires intercepted our formation 40 miles from target. Impossible unless they knew our exact route. August 8th. RAF fighters appeared from 3 directions simultaneously, suggesting coordinated response based on advanced warning. By early August, the situation had evolved dramatically from German expectations. Luftwaffe losses increased steadily, with experienced pilots like Steinbrenner's close friend, Oberleutnant Hans Bergmann, failing to return from what should have been routine missions. The promised quick victory over Britain stretched into weeks, then months, with German aircrew reporting increasingly sophisticated British defensive responses that defied all intelligence predictions. The real shock came when Steinbrenner participated in a carefully planned dawn raid on August 12th, designed to achieve complete surprise by approaching at extreme low altitude across the channel. His formation of 18 Bf-109s maintained radio silence, flew below 500 feet to avoid detection, and approached the Kent coast just after sunrise when British pilots should have been least alert. The plan represented everything German tactical doctrine promised: speed, surprise, and overwhelming local superiority. Instead of catching sleeping airfields, they encountered a perfectly coordinated reception. British fighters were already airborne in formation, climbing to intercept at the precise moment German aircraft crossed the coastline. Spitfires attacked from superior altitude, while Hurricanes positioned themselves to cut off retreat routes. The engagement lasted less than 10 minutes, but 6 German aircraft were destroyed, while British losses remained minimal. Steinbrenner barely escaped, his aircraft damaged by cannon fire that should never have found its target. Perhaps most devastating was the realization that British pilots seemed to know details about German formations that even German pilots didn't always possess. During the August 12th engagement, an RAF squadron leader called out over radio frequencies, "Tally-ho, 18 bandits approaching Dover at Angels 2 heading northwest." The precision stunned Steinbrenner. The British pilot had accurately identified their formation strength, altitude, and bearing, while German aircraft were still miles from visual range. According to Steinbrenner, who was present during the engagement, the British response demonstrated coordination impossible without advanced warning. "They knew we were coming before we crossed the French coast," he later wrote in his diary. "The Spitfires were climbing into position while our engines were still warming up at Calais. This cannot be the same primitive radar system we were briefed about." The numbers seemed impossible, yet the evidence surrounded them daily. While German intelligence insisted British radar could detect perhaps 60% of incoming raids, actual interception rates approached 85%. In the time it took German formations to cross the channel, approximately 15 minutes, British fighters consistently achieved advantageous positioning that should have required at least 30 minutes of advance warning. The accumulating evidence became impossible to ignore as August progressed. Steinbrenner and his fellow pilots began documenting instances where British defensive responses exceeded theoretical capabilities by enormous margins. RAF Fighter Command seemed to possess detailed intelligence about German operations that approached supernatural accuracy. British pilots intercepted German formations at precisely calculated positions, suggesting advanced knowledge of routes, timing, and tactical intentions. Steinbrenner's growing realization accelerated during a conversation with Hauptmann Werner Mulders, one of Germany's most experienced fighter aces, following a particularly costly mission on August 18th. Mulders had led a formation of 40 Bf-109s in a diversionary attack designed to draw British fighters away from the main bombing raid. The diversion failed completely when RAF squadrons ignored the fighter sweep and concentrated instead on intercepting the bombing formation with devastating effectiveness. Klaus, Mulders confided during debriefing, "Something fundamental has changed. The British are fighting as if they can see our every move before we make it. Their controllers position squadrons with the precision of chess masters who somehow know our strategy in advance. This isn't luck or superior pilots, it's systematic, coordinated." What Steinbrenner discovered was that British radar technology had advanced far beyond German intelligence estimates. The chain-home system, dismissed in Luftwaffe briefings as experimental and unreliable, actually consisted of a sophisticated network of interconnected stations that provided continuous surveillance of approaching aircraft from distances exceeding 100 miles. Each radar station could track multiple formations simultaneously, providing accurate data on altitude, heading, speed, and approximate aircraft numbers. The disparity was staggering. German estimates suggested British radar could detect large formations at ranges of perhaps 30 to 40 miles under ideal conditions, while the actual detection range extended beyond 120 miles for high-altitude formations and maintained effectiveness down to wavetop level approaches. British radar operators could track individual aircraft with precision that allowed ground controllers to vector intercepting fighters to within visual range of targets. In the time it took German formations to assemble over French airfields, cross the Channel, and approach British targets, roughly 45 minutes from engine start to target approach, British radar provided continuous tracking that allowed RAF Fighter Command to calculate optimal interception points with mathematical precision. British squadron leaders received detailed briefings about incoming raids while German pilots were still conducting pre-flight checks. Radar operators had developed techniques that transformed defensive air warfare into a scientific discipline. Controllers at sector stations received real-time updates from multiple radar sites, creating detailed pictures of German formations that included not only position and heading, but also formation structure and probable targets. This information allowed British fighters to climb to optimal altitudes along calculated interception courses that positioned them advantageously before visual contact occurred. The technical superiority extended beyond detection capabilities. British radar sites operated in coordinated networks that eliminated blind spots and provided redundant coverage of critical areas. German pilots discovered that low-altitude approaches, night raids, and diversionary tactics that had proven effective against other opponents failed consistently against the British system. RAF controllers adapted quickly to German tactical changes, suggesting sophisticated analysis of attack patterns and countermeasures. Steinbrenner recorded his growing understanding in increasingly detailed diary entries. August 20th. The radar towers we see along the coast represent only visible elements of a system that extends far inland. British controllers seem to possess complete pictures of our formations from the moment we take off. August 22nd. Spoke with pilots from other squadrons. Everyone reports identical experiences. British fighters positioned perfectly for interception, as if they had been briefed on our exact routes hours in advance.
Personal testimonies from captured British pilots provided additional shocking revelations. Flight Lieutenant David Crampton, shot down during an engagement over Canterbury on August 25th, explained to Steinbrenner during temporary detention before prisoner exchange, "Your formation was plotted on our operations board before you crossed the French coast. We knew your approximate strength, altitude, and heading 20 minutes before visual contact. Our controllers calculated the intercept point while your aircraft was still climbing to operational altitude." The revelation destroyed fundamental assumptions about modern air warfare that had shaped German tactical doctrine. Luftwaffe planners had based their strategies on achieving surprise through speed and superior aircraft performance, believing that defensive systems remained primitive and easily overwhelmed. The discovery that British technology provided continuous surveillance of German operations from takeoff to landing represented a paradigm shift that changed everything. The tipping point of complete realization came during Steinbrenner's participation in the massive daylight raid of September 15, 1940, later remembered as the climax of the Battle of Britain. German High Command had planned the operation as a decisive blow to break British resistance through overwhelming force. Over 1,500 German aircraft would attack London in coordinated waves designed to saturate British defensive capabilities and achieve final air superiority. Steinbrenner's squadron formed part of the escort for 200 Heinkel A-11 bombers approaching London from the southeast. German planners believed such massive formations would overwhelm British radar and fighter responses, finally achieving the breakthrough that had eluded previous attempts. Intelligence briefings promised that British Fighter Command had been weakened by weeks of continuous combat and lacked sufficient aircraft to contest such a large-scale assault. The journey from the French coast to London should have taken approximately 35 minutes, allowing British controllers minimal time to organize effective responses. German formations maintained tight discipline, radio silence, and optimal altitudes designed to maximize speed while minimizing vulnerability. Everything suggested the element of surprise that had been promised since the beginning of the campaign.
Instead, they encountered the most coordinated defensive response Steinbrenner had ever witnessed. British fighters appeared in unprecedented numbers, attacking from multiple directions with precision that suggested detailed advanced planning. RAF squadrons had been positioned at optimal altitudes along calculated interception routes that maximized their effectiveness while minimizing German advantages. The British response demonstrated tactical coordination impossible without comprehensive intelligence about German plans. What shocked Steinbrenner most profoundly was the systematic nature of British defensive tactics. RAF controllers had positioned fighter squadrons to attack German formations in sequence, maintaining continuous pressure while rotating units to prevent exhaustion. British pilots attacked with confidence that suggested complete familiarity with German formation structures, preferred tactics, and probable responses to various scenarios. The engagement evolved into a running battle across southeastern England that lasted over 2 hours and covered hundreds of miles. British fighters maintained contact with German formations throughout the operation, attacking consistently while ground controllers provided continuous updates on formation positions and movements. RAF pilots received detailed tactical information that allowed them to exploit every advantage while minimizing their exposure to German defensive fire. Steinbrenner later wrote in his diary, "September 15th changed everything. The British fought as if they possessed complete maps of our intentions drawn weeks in advance. Every tactical move we attempted met prepared responses that suggested the enemy had rehearsed counters to our strategies before we implemented them. This cannot be explained by pilot skill or aircraft performance alone." The aftermath of September 15th provided devastating evidence of British technological superiority. German losses exceeded 60 aircraft destroyed with over 100 damaged, while British losses remained below 30 aircraft.
The disparity demonstrated not only superior defensive coordination, but also the failure of German assumptions about technological advantage. British radar had provided such comprehensive intelligence that RAF Fighter Command fought the battle with systematic precision that overwhelmed German tactical advantages. Perhaps most revealing was post-mission analysis conducted by Luftwaffe intelligence officers who interviewed returning aircrew. Pilot after pilot reported identical experiences. British fighters positioned perfectly for attack. Ground controllers who seemed to possess detailed information about German formations, and defensive responses that adapted quickly to changing tactical situations. The pattern suggested systematic intelligence gathering capabilities that far exceeded German estimates. In a September 18th interview with Major Hans Ostermann, Steinbrenner reflected on the implications. "Looking back, I understand now that we have been fighting an enemy who could observe our every movement from the moment we started engines. The British radar system represents a technological revolution that has made traditional concepts of surprise obsolete. We have been trying to achieve tactical advantage against an opponent who possessed strategic intelligence about our operations." According to witnesses who were present during debriefings, Steinbrenner's realization reflected broader recognition among German aircrew that fundamental assumptions about the air campaign required complete revision. The discovery that British technology provided comprehensive surveillance capabilities changed German understanding of modern warfare and forced recognition that technological superiority lay with their opponents rather than themselves. The numbers painted a stark picture of transformation. While German aircraft production maintained steady output of approximately 1,000 units per month, British production had increased to over 1,500 aircraft monthly by September 1940. British pilot training programs had expanded to graduate over 300 pilots monthly compared to German programs producing fewer than 200 replacement aircrew.
Most significantly, British radar stations provided defensive capabilities that multiplied the effectiveness of available fighters by factors that German planners had never anticipated. By October 1940, the revelation had fundamentally transformed German air operations over Britain. Steinbrenner and his fellow pilots adapted their tactics to acknowledge British technological superiority, abandoning strategies based on achieving surprise in favor of approaches that accepted continuous enemy surveillance. The psychological impact proved as significant as the tactical adjustments, as German aircrew confronted the reality that their most fundamental advantages had been neutralized by technology they had neither anticipated nor understood. The long-term consequences extended far beyond individual pilot experiences. German High Command was forced to acknowledge that the rapid victory they had promised was impossible against an opponent capable of tracking every movement and coordinating responses with scientific precision. The Battle of Britain shifted from an air superiority campaign to a war of attrition that favored defenders who possessed comprehensive intelligence about attacking forces. Steinbrenner's personal transformation reflected broader changes in German military thinking. His diary entries from late 1940 documented growing respect for British technical capabilities and recognition that German intelligence had fundamentally misunderstood their defensive systems. October 12th. We have been fighting blind against an enemy who could see everything. The radar towers represent only the visible elements of a system that transforms air warfare into a mathematical discipline where defenders possess overwhelming advantages. The technological gap continued widening as British radar systems evolved throughout 1940 and into 1941. New developments included airborne radar for night fighting, ground-controlled interception techniques that guided fighters to within visual range of targets, and integration of radar data with anti-aircraft gun positions that created coordinated defensive networks of unprecedented effectiveness. Each innovation multiplied the defensive advantages that had surprised German pilots during their initial encounters with Chain Home. British radar operators developed increasingly sophisticated techniques for analyzing German formations and predicting tactical intentions.
Controllers learned to identify different aircraft types by their radar signatures, estimate formation strength with remarkable accuracy, and calculate probable targets based on heading and altitude changes. This analytical capability transformed radar from a detection system into a comprehensive intelligence-gathering network that provided British commanders with detailed pictures of German capabilities and intentions. The strategic implications revolutionized air warfare doctrine throughout the world. Military planners in every major power recognized that radar technology had fundamentally altered the relationship between offensive and defensive air operations. The traditional advantages of surprise, speed, and concentration could be neutralized by defensive systems that provided comprehensive surveillance and coordinated response capabilities. For individual pilots like Steinbrenner, the discovery represented a profound personal and professional transformation. The confidence that had characterized German aircrew at the beginning of the Battle of Britain gave way to realistic assessment of technological realities and tactical limitations. German pilots learned to respect their opponents not only as skilled aviators, but as representatives of a military system that had achieved technological superiority in the critical area of defensive coordination. Steinbrenner survived the war and became an instructor at post-war aviation schools, where he emphasized the importance of understanding enemy capabilities rather than assuming technological superiority.
His experiences during the Battle of Britain shaped his teaching approach, which stressed systematic analysis of opponents' strengths and adaptation of tactics to acknowledge technological realities rather than pursuing strategies based on wishful thinking or inadequate intelligence. Years later, Steinbrenner reflected on the profound impact of his radar revelation during interviews conducted in the 1960s. The experience had taught him that technological advantage could shift rapidly between opponents and that military success depended on accurate assessment of relative capabilities rather than assumptions based on propaganda or outdated intelligence. In post-war Europe, where former enemies had become allies, the lesson proved relevant to broader questions of international cooperation and mutual understanding. The radar towers that had once seemed like crude experiments represented more than advanced technology. They contained a revolution in defensive warfare that changed the fundamental dynamics of aerial combat. For German pilots who had expected easy victory based on superior aircraft and training, the lesson was both humbling and educational, that technological innovation could neutralize traditional military advantages, and that success required constant adaptation to tactical realities rather than reliance on past victories or theoretical superiority. The Battle of Britain demonstrated that modern warfare rewarded not only courage and skill, but also scientific analysis, systematic coordination, and technological innovation applied to tactical problems. Steinbrenner's experience with British radar represented a microcosm of broader changes in military affairs that would characterize the remainder of World War II and influence military thinking for decades afterward. The shock of technological surprise became a catalyst for innovation that transformed both offensive and defensive strategies throughout the global conflict. The intelligence revelations continued mounting throughout late 1940 as German reconnaissance flights documented the true extent of British radar installations. Oberst Heinrich Eckart, commander of Aufklärungsgruppe 122, briefed Steinbrenner's squadron on photographs taken by high-altitude Junkers U-86P aircraft flying at 42,000 feet. The images revealed not dozens but hundreds of radar installations scattered across Britain, forming an integrated network of surveillance that provided complete coverage of approaches from every direction. Each installation connected to others through underground cables and radio links, creating redundant communication systems that remained operational even when individual sites suffered bombing damage. German cryptographers working under Oberst Wolfgang Martini made equally disturbing discoveries about British radio intercept capabilities.
RAF Fighter Command possessed sophisticated direction-finding equipment that could locate German radio transmissions with precision sufficient to vector intercepting fighters directly to broadcasting aircraft. German pilots who maintained radio silence found themselves tracked by radar, while those who transmitted tactical information provided British controllers with additional intelligence about formation composition and intended targets. The technological disadvantage extended beyond detection systems to encompass the entire British defensive infrastructure. RAF sector stations received radar data through dedicated telephone lines that provided constant updates every 30 seconds, creating real-time tactical pictures impossible to achieve through visual observation or radio reports. British controllers could track dozens of individual formations simultaneously while calculating interception courses for multiple fighter squadrons responding to different threats across hundreds of square miles. Steinbrenner participated in experimental night operations designed to exploit supposed British radar limitations during darkness.
Intelligence reports suggested that British radar effectiveness declined significantly after sunset, providing opportunities for German bombers to approach targets undetected. The October 18th mission targeting aircraft factories near Birmingham seemed ideal for testing these assumptions, with clear weather and moonless conditions favoring German attackers. The reality proved even more shocking than daylight experiences. British night fighters appeared with uncanny accuracy, intercepting German bombers with precision that suggested radar-guided attacks impossible under visual conditions. RAF pilots flying Bristol Beaufighters demonstrated ability to locate and attack German aircraft in complete darkness from distances and angles that eliminated any possibility of visual detection. The British had developed airborne radar systems that transformed individual fighters into autonomous hunting platforms capable of independent target acquisition. Lieutenant Gustav Zimmermann, Steinbrenner's wingman during the Birmingham raid, described the encounter in terms that reflected growing German understanding of British technological superiority. The Beaufighter appeared from nowhere, attacking from our starboard quarter during a climbing turn through heavy clouds. No human pilot could have positioned himself so precisely without electronic assistance. They have developed radar systems small enough to install in fighter aircraft while maintaining effectiveness that exceeds our ground installations. British radar integration reached levels of sophistication that German engineers had considered theoretically impossible. RAF controllers received continuous data streams from coastal radar sites, inland installations, observer course posts, and airborne platforms that created comprehensive tactical awareness extending from ground level to 40,000 feet altitude across the entire British Isles. This information flowed through communication networks designed to maintain operational capability even under sustained bombing attacks that targeted key installations. The strategic implications forced complete revision of German air campaign objectives. Luftwaffe planners abandoned hopes of achieving air superiority through tactical surprise, instead accepting prolonged attrition warfare against an opponent who possessed overwhelming intelligence advantages. German bomber formations required increasingly heavy fighter escorts that reduced payload capacity and operational range while increasing fuel consumption and maintenance requirements. Steinbrenner's squadron adapted to these realities through tactical modifications that acknowledged British technological superiority while attempting to minimize its impact. German formations began varying altitudes, headings, and timing in random patterns designed to complicate British tracking and interception calculations. These countermeasures achieved limited success, occasionally causing British fighters to arrive at incorrect positions, but could not overcome fundamental intelligence disadvantages created by comprehensive radar coverage. The psychological transformation among German aircrew proved as significant as tactical adaptations. Pilots who had begun the campaign with supreme confidence in technological superiority confronted daily evidence of British advances that exceeded German capabilities in critical areas.
Morale declined as aircrew recognized that their most fundamental assumptions about modern air warfare required complete revision based on technological realities rather than propaganda promises. German intelligence services attempted to understand British radar technology through various methods, including signal intercepts, crashed equipment analysis, and prisoner interrogation. These efforts revealed disturbing information about British research programs that had achieved breakthroughs in electronic warfare, radio navigation, and communication systems years ahead of German parallel programs. British scientists had solved technical problems that German researchers had not yet recognized as critical limitations.
The radar revelation extended beyond immediate tactical concerns to encompass broader questions about German research priorities and technological development strategies. Luftwaffe Technical Services discovered that British investments in defensive electronics had created capabilities that neutralized traditional German advantages in aircraft design and pilot training. The realization forced recognition that future military success required systematic attention to emerging technologies rather than concentration on conventional weapons systems. Steinbrenner's diary entries from November 1940 documented growing awareness of British technical achievements and their implications for German strategic planning. November 8th. The British have transformed air warfare into an electronic discipline where traditional concepts of surprise and tactical advantage become irrelevant. Their radar systems provide comprehensive intelligence that makes defensive operations scientifically predictable, while reducing offensive advantages to minimal levels. We are fighting against an enemy who can observe our movements continuously while concealing his own capabilities until engagement occurs. By December 1940, German High Command officially acknowledged that daylight bombing operations against Britain had become prohibitively expensive due to British radar-directed fighter defenses. The campaign shifted to night operations that reduced accuracy while maintaining pressure on British industrial targets, representing tacit admission that German air power could not achieve decisive results against radar-equipped defenses. This strategic adjustment marked the effective end of German attempts to win air superiority over Britain through conventional tactical approaches. The long-term influence of Steinbrenner's radar revelation shaped post-war aviation development and military doctrine worldwide. His detailed reports contributed to German understanding of electronic warfare importance and influenced Luftwaffe research priorities during the remainder of World War II. German scientists accelerated development of their own radar systems while creating countermeasures designed to neutralize Allied electronic advantages. International military observers recognized that radar technology represented a fundamental shift in warfare dynamics, comparable to the introduction of gunpowder or mechanized vehicles. Nations throughout the world initiated crash programs to develop similar capabilities while revising tactical doctrines to accommodate the reality that electronic surveillance could eliminate traditional advantages based on surprise and mobility. The human dimension remained central to Steinbrenner's understanding of technological transformation. Individual pilots, regardless of skill and courage, found themselves operating within electronic warfare environments that reduced personal initiative while increasing dependence on systematic coordination and technological support. The romantic image of individual combat between skilled aviators gave way to recognition that modern air warfare required industrial-scale technical capabilities and scientific approaches to tactical problems. Steinbrenner's experience with British radar during the Battle of Britain became emblematic of broader technological surprises that characterized World War II and subsequent military developments. His personal transformation from confident superiority to realistic assessment of opponent capabilities reflected changes in military thinking that would influence strategic planning for decades afterward. The shock of discovering enemy technological advantages created lasting awareness that military success required continuous innovation and accurate intelligence about opponent capabilities rather than assumptions based on previous experiences or theoretical analyses.